Welcome to Hard Talk with me, Zainab Badawi. Could Turkey be slipping back into conflict? A fragile three-year peace process between the government and Kurdish militants from the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, has broken down. Several Turkish soldiers and police have been killed in the past few weeks, and the government blames the PKK. It has retaliated with attacks on their bases. So there are now concerns that the current hostilities will deepen in a country that borders both Syria and Iraq, where Islamist extremists operate. My guest is Turkish MP Ertugrul Kurkcu, Honorary President of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, the HDP. Its unexpected success in the recent elections robbed the governing AK Party of a majority in Parliament for the first time. What is he doing to prevent a further escalation of violence in Turkey? Ertugrul Kurkcu in Istanbul, welcome to Hard Talk. What is your party, the HDP, doing to stop the hostilities between the government and the Kurdish militant party, the PKK, from getting worse?
First of all, we are calling all the parties, I mean the PKK and the government, to turn back to the negotiations process. Because our observation is that the hostilities has resumed due to President Tayyip Erdogan's denial of the peace negotiations as the basic method of solving the Kurdish problem and closing all the paths to negotiation. This is the major factor behind the increased tension between the government forces and the PKK.
Well, I put it to you that the increased, could I just say, I put it to you that the increased tensions could be related to the fact that on July the 20th, there was a killing of around a dozen Turkish soldiers and police, and the PKK are responsible for that, according to the government.
Actually, before these killings, happened a lot of other atrocities. There was a huge massacre in the Suruç district of Şanlıurfa province, where 32 people lost their lives after a presumed IS attack on a group of volunteers who were intended to go to Kobane for rebuilding the city, and therefore both the PKK and the Kurdish people have held the Turkish government responsible for paving the path for IS to commit such a big,
well, let's just, can I just, because it's quite confusing for a lot of people, on July the 20th, there was that suicide attack, as you say, in Suruç, which killed more than 30 Kurdish activists. But the government has blamed that on the so-called Islamic State, who ordered it. So why are you blaming the government in Ankara for something which was done by Islamic State?
Because it's a general understanding in Turkey. Almost all the opposition groups are holding the Turkish government responsible for the growth of IS, both in the Syrian soil and within Turkey. There has grown a great IS network, and Turkish government has taken no real serious measures against the IS, both in Turkey and in Syria.
So
therefore,
do you believe, can I interrupt you there? I'm sorry, could you clarify this point then, sir? Do you believe that there is collusion between the Turkish government and Islamic State? Is that what you are basically saying?
Yes, that is what we are saying. In spite that the Turkish government pays a lip service to international struggle against IS, our observation is that the Turkish government is both in Turkey and in Syria is tolerating IS activities as a counterweight against PYD, the Democratic Unity Party of the Kurds in Syria, and the Kurdish groups in Turkey. Therefore, we see that the eruption of violence once again in Turkey is the result of Turkish government's return from and denial of peace negotiations.
But on that specific issue of so-called IS, you know that the government has persistently denied that accusation. President Erdogan says Turkey has fought terrorism for many years. We have paid a heavy price in that process, and we will honour our own in that effort. And as such, as a country, Turkey can never support any terrorist organisations. He says any links that people say they have with IS amount to slander and lies and completely untrue.
This is not as simple as the government says. The Turkish government has supported the Free Syrian Army as the major tool against the Assad regime for a regime change in Turkey. And IS is an offshoot of Free Syrian Army, which has fragmented to Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra and IS in Syria. The IS has been born in Iraq, but very quickly taken under control, groups splitting from Free Syrian Army, and all the support Turkey has provided to Free Syrian Army has finally went to IS.
You're giving us the background there. You're giving us the background there, and other people have said this, but very simple question. Do you believe now, where we are now, that IS operatives or militants are being supported by Ankara? Slightly different point from what you were giving us, the kind of historical background.
Yeah, the present measures taken by the Turkish government is too little and too late. There's yet any military activity against IS in the Syrian soil, but the Turkish government, having taken the backing of the international coalition to act against IS, is now striking at the major opponent of IS in the Syria and in the Syrian soil and in the Middle East.
I know that you Kurds, Turkish Kurds such as yourself, are very concerned about what's going on in Kobani, which is in Syria, and where the Syrian Kurds under the PYD party you mentioned are trying to fight IS. But let's just keep this focused on Turkey for the moment. If you are saying what you are saying, and others in your party are also saying that the government is not committed to the peace process, and President Erdogan says it is not possible for us to continue the peace process with those who threaten our national unity, it looks like the hostilities in Turkey will deepen.
If we let it be, it will deepen. You can create a full disaster from any little disagreement if you wish. Therefore, it depends on how you treat the disagreements. First of all, we demand, and we insist that we have to go back to negotiations table, because the negotiations table has come out of the conflict for 30 years. What we are speaking about is a very similar conflict to the Northern Ireland and the Britain conflict. And let's recall our memories, how this disagreement, how this conflict was resolved. Turkish government is always denying that it is faced with an insurgency of the people, but calls what we are faced with as terrorism, and claims that they are fighting against terrorism. This is not correct. What we have
PKK,
at hand is insurgency.
I know the HDP is a pro-Kurdish party that's in the Turkish parliament for the first time, and you won that stunning election victory when you got 13% of the vote and you robbed the ruling AK party for the first time in more than a decade of a majority. But the fact is the PKK has on and off been waging a conflict with the government in Ankara. It is seen as a militant organisation not only by Ankara but also the United States and the European Union. What is your link? What is your relationship of the HDP, pro-democracy party, and the PKK?
We have no organizational and no organic. And to use Tayyip Erdogan's, the president's terminology, or inorganic relations with PKK.
So do you condemn the attacks that they have carried out in the past few weeks, in which we've seen more than a dozen Turkish security forces killed? Do you condemn those? Yeah,
this is not a matter of condemnation or condoning. This is something else. We have to first see what's happening. What's happening is a 90-year struggle, of which 30 years is now between Turkish state and the Kurdish insurgency. Therefore, if you have insurgency, it means that you have violence and you have counter-violence. Therefore, one-sided denunciations play no role in such a conflict. This is done by all government agencies, all pro-government organizations, etc. What we say is, yes, we are urging for immediate peace. We don't want violence, and we don't want violence.
If you don't want violence, sorry to interrupt you here, because you didn't answer my question. If you don't want violence, do you unreservedly, unequivocally condemn the attacks that we have seen carried out by the PKK? We've seen a pipeline attack on the borders we've seen a police station attacked on the border with Iran, a pipeline on the border with Iraq by the militants.
What we say is that we denounce the war situation. This is not a one-sided issue. The Turkish armed forces, Turkish police forces, Turkish gendarme forces, Turkish intelligence agencies are also committing crimes against humanity. There are crimes of war during this war. So we denounce all war crimes.
They are attacking bases belonging to the PKK for the first time inside Syria, and also they've done it, of course, in the Kurdistan area of Iraq, in northern Iraq. So that's what they are targeting.
No, the civilian Turkey is not a proper democracy as such. We need a thorough constitutional amendment, which is still on the way, and we are still ruled by the military junta constitution. Therefore, under this constitution, we cannot speak about proper democratic relations, proper democratic politics. What we are trying to do is normalizing democracy, normalizing politics, and bring about a peaceful solution to what's going on. But I would say
but how
that the
will
Turkish
you bring?
government...
That's the point. You keep on saying you want negotiations to come about, but I put to you something that Soner Cekapti from Washington Institute, which is a think tank, says this is a chance for the pro-democracy wing of the Kurdish nationalist movement, your HDP, to finally take over its violent wing, the PKK. Are you going to be able to do that, to take the violence out of Kurdish politics in Turkey?
Actually, I must correct some terms. First of all, we are not a pro-Kurdish party. we are a political party, a unity party of the Kurdish liberation movement and Turkey's democratic and left forces, first of all. Secondly, our progress, the progress of HDP, cannot be designated as a progress of the peaceful wing of the Kurdish movement vis-à-vis the terrorist wing. There is no such relationship between HDP and the PKK.
That's what President Erdogan says, though. President Erdogan calls the HDP the PKK's extension in Parliament. We've also had Ziya Pir, an HDP candidate from Diyarbakir, saying you cannot divide between PKK sympathisers and HDP voters. So there is a kind of link.
Our party's opinions are voiced by our president, our leadership, our Central Committee members. The opinions of individual MPs belong to them. We are a pluralist party. There may be shade of opinions. We have never ever spoken about a direct relationship between the HDP and the PKK.
Do you not act as a go-between, though? Does your party not act as a go-between for the AK party and the imprisoned PKK leader, Abdullah Öcalan, who's been imprisoned since was captured in 1999? You do act as a go-between, don't you?
Yes, we do, of course, because we are coming among mostly among the Kurdish voters who are affiliated with the liberation struggle. They are fighting for broader freedoms. Therefore, their brethren, their nieces, nephews, sons and daughters are fighting in the PKK. They are voting for HDP. So this is a very complicated social background. And relying on this background, we are mediating between the imprisoned leader Öcalan and the KCK, the umbrella organization of the Kurdish organizations.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought up the KCK there, because an official statement from the Kurdistan Communities Union, which is the umbrella organization, the PKK, rejects the idea that the HDP, or indeed Abdullah Öcalan in his prison of Imrali, can tell them what to do. So what are the prospects?
No, it's not that sharp, and it's not that indirect. What they say is that they may do the final resolution about the final laying down of arms or not, but they are open to listening everybody. So they listen to us, they listen to Öcalan, they listen to the state. Of course, they are going to make a decision. And we wish that they make a decision in a very short time on the direction of stopping armed confrontation in within the Turkish territory, because KCK is also active in Iran and in Iraq and in Syria. Okay. Therefore, we are responsible for the Turkish conflict.
But now the concern is that this stepped up state of hostilities between the PKK and the government in Ankara in Turkey means that President Erdogan has become more embroiled in the regional conflict. As I said, for the first time, there have been Turkish airstrikes inside Syria, and also Ankara is going to allow the United States to use the Incirlik air base to also launch its own airstrikes. This could be potentially very destabilizing, not only for Turkey, but also for the wider Middle East, couldn't it?
Actually, the strikes on the IS via the Incirlik air base has nothing to do with what Turkish government is now doing in northern Iraq. These are two categorically different areas of interest, and both NATO and the major NATO members, Germany, the United States, have advised the Turkish government to act in a proportionate way in retaliation to the PKK
That may be the case. That may be the
and
case. But they are supporting Turkey. Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, said recently, all allies stand in solidarity with Turkey. We strongly condemn the terrorist attacks. And Aaron Stein from the Royal United Services Institute think tank, he says the US is not going to choose the PKK over Ankara ever. Turkey has very strong allies in the international community.
I'm not that sure. The international community has not made an alliance with Turkey against PKK, but the NATO agreement is something else. And the latest NATO meeting was, of course, a confirmation of the continuity of the alliance, but it didn't mean anything against Turkey's full backing vis-à-vis the Kurdish insurrection. Everybody in the world, every responsible government is advising the Turkish government to go back to the negotiations table. The present situation.
And do you think that will happen soon? Do you think that will happen soon, a return to the negotiating table?
Yes, we can. Yes, if we wish, as I said before, if we wish, yes. Why not? We had started the negotiations in 2013 after 10 years of incessant warfare, and the price for this was thousands of lives
more than
of
40,000
young people.
Sure, more than 40,000 people have died in this conflict, mostly Kurds in Turkey.
Yes.
You've made it very clear, Mr. Kurkcu, that the HDP obviously has got the interests of Turkey's 15 million Kurds out of a population of 80 million at heart, but you also want to appeal to non-Kurdish Turks in the country. And at the election, we saw that you actually had more than 1 million non-Kurdish voters in Turkey. But can you appeal to both constituencies successfully? Continue to do so?
Yes, after all these chaotic situation, asking the opinions of the people, we see that those who have voted for the HDP are determined to vote again in any election. This present crisis is manipulated by President Tayyip Erdogan in order to push the HDP backing back from what is now the 13%, because what they need is at least 330 deputies in the parliament, and the HDP is the major roadblock for Tayyip Erdogan's dreams of a presidential system.
Very quickly, just very briefly and very quickly, if there are snap elections, and people say there may be, do you think the HDP will do very well? Briefly.
Yes, I'm confident that we are going to surpass what we had done in 7 June elections. I'm confident that we are going to be attracting broader votes from different sections of the Turkish society. And in a very short span of time, people will understand that the present war is not a war of security, but it's a war for Tayyip Erdogan's palace.
Thank you very much indeed, Ertugrul Kurkcu in Istanbul, for coming on Hard Talk.